Hello everyone. Welcome to Novel Story in English. I will present the story of a love story, forced marriage. Now Bilmar has returned home, and he is sitting at the dining table chair in the garden with a cup of coffee. With a confused mind, Bilmar bowed his head. Lost in his chaotic thoughts, the only regret he felt was when he remembered what had happened between him and Anggia. Sir, a housekeeper who called Bilmar was able to make Bilmar awake from his daydream. Answered Bilmar without looking at the person. The big master is calling you. There is a guest who wants to meet the master, said the maid, conveying what Rian ordered. Visitor? Asked Bilmar. He hoped it was Anggia. Yes sir, a man, said the maid again. Male? Muttered Bilmar. Dad's in the living room too? Asked Bilmar. Yes, sir, there is Mrs. Ratih and Mr. Besar too, replied the household assistant. Answered Bilmar, nodding. Bilmar took off the coat he was wearing. Put it originally. And he started walking towards the living room. From a distance, Bilmar saw a man in a black suit combined with a black shirt plus his strong body sitting on the sofa facing each other with his parents. Good afternoon Mr. Brian, Bilmar greeted, starting to approach and extending his hand to Brian as if he didn't know anything, even though Bilmar was sure that Brian's purpose of meeting him was because of Anggia. Good afternoon, Brian replied back to Brian's outstretched hand. Bilmar also took his seat. Now there are Rian, Ratih, Bilmar, and Brian, plus an assistant Brian who sits not far from them. What do you need, sir? Asked Bilmar because Brian was only his business partner, and they usually met at the office or even met at the restaurant. Don't mince words, Mr. Bilmar. You know what I mean here, said Brian firmly. Rian and Ratih didn't say anything, and they wanted to see what their child would do. I don't understand, sir, the problem of work? It seems everything is handled well, answered Bilmar casually. Brian placed some photos where Anggia and Bilmar started to enter the car right in front of the apartment where Brian occupied. Bilmar took the photo, and there was no suspicious face seen on Bilmar's face. Bilmar looked so relaxed and pretended he didn't know anything. This is Dr. Anggia, right? Asked Bilmar. Yes, and she's my wife, Brian explained. Your wife? Asked Bilmar pretending not to know that Anggia was Brian's wife. Yes, and in that photo was the last time my wife was with you, and I'm sure you know where my wife is. Brian asked. I do know Dr. Anggia. Because he works at Papa Hardy's hospital, as well as the doctor who treats the wife of my cousin Kenzie Zavano. But I don't understand your question, answered Bilmar with a flat face without the slightest expression. If Brian looked at him coldly, then so did Bilmar. Then what about that photo, which shows you and my wife just as she disappeared? Brian continued to interrogate Bilmar. Brian did see from the CCTV installed at the front of the apartment, but he also didn't know for sure whether Anggia had disappeared with Bilmar or not. This photo is true, Mr. Brian, but there are some things you should know, said Bilmar, who did not want to lose. Bilmar paused his speech, and he began to lean his body. With a calm expression, he began to think about something. Yes, yesterday I was with Dr. Anggia. But that's because I feel sorry for seeing her crying like a confused person, but when I gave a lift, your wife got off in the middle of the road, and I didn't know where your wife was, said Bilmar. Bilmar deliberately pretended not to know anything as well as to hide what had happened between him and Anggia. Because he also doesn't know where Anggia is, Bilmar is afraid that Brian will find out, and Brian was the first to find Anggia's whereabouts. It could make Brian do worse things than before, like the violence Anggia told him. What you say is true, Mr. Bilmar? Asked Brian, who didn't seem satisfied with the answer Bilmar gave. You're so funny, Mr. Brian, said Bilmar with a chuckle looking at Brian. Brian didn't understand what Bilmar meant. He just wants to know where Anggia is, and he also wants to bring Anggia back. Also, Brian wants to apologize and fix everything. Since Anggia left, Brian has felt lonely, and the women who used to accompany him can no longer replace Anggia. Brian began to realize he really wanted Anggia, and did not want Anggia to leave him. What do you mean? Brian asked coldly. You say you're her husband, but you don't know where your own wife is. Out of all the people, did you not come to anyone other than me? Or did your wife leave because she was disappointed with you that she hid from her own husband? Asked Bilmar, mocking Brian subtly. It's a private matter for our household, and I don't think it's any of your business, Brian replied. Yes, you are right. Excuse me, Brian said goodbye to everyone there. Yes, sir, the door is over there, said Bilmar, pointing to the exit. Brian left the house and was followed by his personal assistant. Brian got into the car with emotion because of the subtle sarcasm that Bilmar made to him. Actually, he wanted to bully Bilmar, but it turned out that he was the one who got hit hard through the words that Bilmar made. Since last night, Brian has only been grumpy because Anggia left him. Even Brian kicked out all the women who were partying in his apartment, which he did almost every night. But somehow, Brian felt that something was missing. His heart felt empty because Anggia wasn't there. Bilmar tries to find Anggia, but this time Anggia is like being swallowed by the earth because Brian really can't find Anggia. Anton, Brian called his assistant, who was driving. Yes, boss, replied Anton. Any news from your men? Brian asked. No, sir, said Anton. Tisk, Brian huffed in annoyance and massaged his sore temples. Can't you mobilize more of your men? Snapped Brian. Yes, sir, later I will deploy more, and they will also check some flights. Maybe Madam goes out of town, said Anton, who got the idea. You're right, maybe so. Try to check all the flights properly, so you don't miss the slightest bit, Brian said. Yes, sir. Why did you lie? Rian started to look at Bilmar seriously. Lie what, sir? Asked Bilmar. You said you didn't know where Anggia was, even though you brought her to your favorite villa yesterday and stayed there. Rian knew what his son was doing except for the forbidden events that night. Bilmar is also sure that Dad knows. What is it that Aaron didn't tell Dad? Bilmar knows very well what his assistant is like, and he will always report about himself to his father. Solve your problem. Rianda stepped away, leaving Ratih and Bilmar still sitting on the sofa. Bill. Ratih was curious about what really happened. Yes, ma'am, Bilmar was sure Ratih would ask about Anggia. And Bilmar would not be able to lie to the First Lady whom he esteemed so highly. Why did you take someone's wife with you? Asked Ratih. Mother, Bilmar wants to tell a story, said Bilmar looking at Ratih with a sad face. What? Asked Ratih, who was also curious. Bilmar got up from his seat. Ratih knew that her favorite child wanted to tell her something very important. Ratih knows very well what her favorite child's attitude is. Ratih also followed Bilmar's steps. Ratih knew that Bilmar would want to talk in his room so that no one would hear his conversation. What's wrong with you? Asked Ratih, now sitting on the side of Bilmar's bed. Bilmar locked the door and hugged Ratih, buried his face in Ratih's stomach, sobbing. Wow, he has a stout body, the position of CEO, he is famous for being a playboy and has an ice-cold nature. But he still hugs mommy, said Ratih. Ratih just wants to comfort her son because she knows the nature of her child since childhood. If the problems she faces are very heavy, that's what she does, crying in her mother's lap. No one knows Bilmar's attitude can be so crybaby. Even Rian never knows if his only son, who he raised to be a cruel and cold man, could cry. Only Ratih knows that. Mom, Bilmar loves Anggia, said Bilmar, who was still hugging Ratih. Ratih took a deep breath, and her hand began to reach out to stroke the child's back. Bil, Anggia already has a husband, and you have to bury your love, said Ratih. Bilmar got up and sat beside Ratih. Anggia has never been happy with her marriage, which has been going on for almost 2 years, said Bilmar to Ratih. You mean? Asked Ratih, increasingly curious about Bilmar's words. Yes, Anggia left because he was hurt. Even Brian had the heart to let him go in the middle of the night because Anggia's parents died, ma'am, Bilmar told what Anggia had told him that night. Is it possible? Brian is as brave as Bil, asked Ratih as if she was a little doubtful about Bilmar's words, but she also knew that her son had never lied to her. Even that night, Anggia was almost raped by a gang of Mam's thugs, said Bilmar, continuing his speech. What's Bil? On. Ratih couldn't continue her words. Ratih covered her mouth because she was horrified to hear how much Anggia suffered. Yes, and Anggia owes Brian's father, the person who has paid for Anggia's father's late medical treatment. And the tuition fees, ma'am, said Bilmar, continuing to tell what caused Bilmar to take Anggia. You said you love Anggia, pay the debt, said Ratih to Bilmar. Pay? Asked Bilmar, really? It never crossed his mind. Yet, he said love needs Bilmar's struggle and sacrifice, said Ratih. Ratih is a type of woman who is chatty and slang, sometimes. She considers Bilmar a friend, and sometimes she can also be an opponent. Yes, ma'am, Bilmar will think about it later, said Bilmar. He was silent and thoughtful. Oh my gosh, Bil, you give 5 billion, you don't lose, you think about that kind of money for people who say you love. Usually, you also give free money to your girlfriends out there. Ratih started to get emotional because she thought Bilmar didn't serious about his words of love to Anggia. Yes, but now Bilmar is dizzy, ma'am. Last night Anggia and Bilmar, and this morning when Bilmar woke up Anggia was gone, said Bilmar, telling what happened. Bilmar, are you aware of what you said earlier? Ratih began to approach Bilmar, who was standing leaning against the window. Yes, ma'am, said Bilmar firmly without thinking about his words. Can you repeat what you said earlier? Ratih wanted to hear once again so that her ears could hear the words of the child who was now standing opposite her. Yes, but... Bilmar began to realize what he had said. Are you an Anggia? Asked Ratih by not continuing his speech because Ratih was sure that even without being said, Bilmar knew what Ratih's words meant. Bilmar answered, ma'am, said Ratih again firmly. Yes, me, answered Bilmar is lowering his head. Ratih was silent, and her lips felt numb when she heard Bilmar's answer. How could her son sleep with a woman who was still married? But Bilmar made a mistake, ma'am. Bilmar has tried to avoid it, but Anggia keeps begging for Bilmar to be with him. And Anggia asks Bilmar to hug him, ma'am, so he can calm down. Bilmar loves Anggia, ma'am. Without any incitement from the devil, Bilmar can forget himself and do that, ma'am. If Anggia continues to hug Bilmar, Bilmar explained what he felt. Last night's pleasure did not lead him to beauty, but led him to the abyss of pain that he now feels. Ratih is silent, and she is sure that Bilmar really loves Anggia. Ratih had never seen her proud son like this. His son looked weak because he was deceived by false love. Love that still belongs to someone else, Bilmar, is like holding a red rose that looks beautiful, and if it is picked, it will be pricked by a needle, and only blood is a witness to the pain. Bilmar. I'm not blaming Anggia here. But I'm blaming you because what she needs is strength and calm, not the warmth of the bed. And you take the opportunity when Anggia feels cramped. Here you are wrong, Ratih blamed Bilmar for what happened. According to Ratih Bilmar, it was wrong because when Anggia was weak and at the lowest point, Bilmar took advantage of it all. Ma'am, Bilmar will do anything from Anggia. So it belongs to Bilmar. Bilmar felt responsible for the chastity he had snatched away from the woman he loved. And he will make Anggia his halal lover. You want Brian's widowed wife? Asked Ratih. Doesn't your mother agree with Bilmar and Anggia? Bilmar, instead of answering but instead asked back. My mother agrees whether you want a girl or a widow, as long as you sell it. Ratih began to tease Bilmar because Ratih saw the sadness in Bilmar's eyes. What's the matter, mother? Irritated Bilmar. Bil, is that why Anggia left without saying goodbye to you? Asked Ratih again. Ma'am, Bilmar was the first person for Anggia that night, said Bilmar honestly so that Ratih would know and Ratih wouldn't forbid him from snatching Anggia from Brian. Bilmar knows what Ratih is like. He will not be allowed to seize the property of others without a really good and clear reason. What? Asked Ratih, trembling. Bilmar, I beg you, don't stop Bilmar from snatching Anggia from her jerk husband, said Bilmar. Yes, it's up to you. What is clear is that you have to be responsible, don't be a coward.